Eventually, the 18th Amendment was repealed in 1933. Why? Well, for a couple of reasons. One, it didn't achieve what the Dry Party had hoped it would achieve, for alcohol was still consumed, and in many cases it was much more potent than what was consumed before the Volstead Act. Since alcohol was still produced and distributed and consumed, more than $300 million annually was lost to state and federal agencies in collection and revenues, in tax collection and revenues. In addition to this, the Depression was in full swing, in part due to the vast unemployment caused by Prohibition and the multitude of industries that were affected. Globe Brewing Company, which had been in operation since 1881, had been producing near beer during Prohibition and quickly converted her operation to produce real beer. In fact, on April 7, 1933, minutes after repeal, H.L. Mencken was drinking Globe's Aero beer at the Rennert Hotel in Baltimore. This was the first beer produced after repeal. After Prohibition, we don't see quite as many breweries in Baltimore as we did prior to the Volstead Act. Globe went through $350,000 worth of renovations to produce 225,000 barrels per year on average. The American Malt Company converts quickly to producing a Pilsner beer instead of malt syrup. They renamed themselves the American Brewery. They took King Gambrinus out of the garden and put him back up where everyone could see that beer was still reigning in Baltimore. They also underwent renovations, $600,000 worth of renovations to double their capacity, and they chose to switch to purchase power in 1934. National Brewing Company, which was founded in 1885, also began producing beer again after Prohibition, although under different ownership and with different recipes. In the beginning of 1934, they were producing National Bohemian. By the end of 1934, they had added National Premium to their list. They also availed themselves of purchase power, and their output reached 500,000 barrels per year. Gunther Brewery, which had been established in 1880, produced ice during Prohibition. The plant was converted back to brewing and became the second beer produced in Baltimore on April 7th of 1933. To meet demands, Gunther also switched to purchase power in 1934 and continued to expand to meet the demand of thirsty consumers, harkening back to the time before the 18th Amendment and the great taste of Gunther, like gold flowing from the taps. In addition to the rise of breweries after repeal, another major step was taken in the production and distribution of quality beer in Baltimore: the invention by the American Can Company of Baltimore of the first beer can in 1935. Now, attempts had been made prior to Prohibition to can beer, very unsuccessfully. What American did that was different was they lined the can, and they adjusted the closure to seal the quality and the fizz into the can and prevent the beer from absorbing the metallic taste. One of the big problems prior to Prohibition was you'd put the beer in the can and you'd seal it and you'd go to drink it and whoa, all you could taste was metal. So American had fixed this by lining the cans and improving the closure. But because of the past history of the attempts at canning beer in Baltimore, none of the brewers were very excited about being the first to put their beer in a can. They wanted to protect their reputation. So the first beer that actually went into a beer can in 1935 came out of New Jersey. It was the Kruger Brewing Company. They were willing to be the guinea pig in the American can. It was very successful, and eventually the Baltimore breweries caught on and began canning their own beer. And we began shipping the beer, not just locally and not just nationally, but as World War II broke out, we began shipping our beer overseas. As we began shipping more and more beer overseas, even though the quality of the can was good, eventually after thousands of miles, distance and time is going to compromise that full flavor. And the military, as they began to drink these beers, began to develop a taste for these kind of mellow brews that would arrive in the Pacific and on the Western Front. The breweries had to adapt to these changing tastes and the competition from the large nationwide breweries like Budweiser and Schaefer and Anheuser-Busch. By 1965, Globe's now vacant brewery was demolished to build a parking lot after brewing rights had been transferred to Cumberland because they couldn't keep up. In 1959, Gunther's was sold to Theodore Ham Brewing of Minnesota, it was a failure, and the brewery was again sold to Schaefer in 1963. American Brewery continued on until 1973 when they closed the brewery. They could no longer compete with National and Canadian-based Carling, which had moved into Baltimore in 1961. In 1975, National and Carling merged to better compete on the national stage. But they could not maintain, and they eventually closed the plant in Baltimore after changing hands a few times. And for the first time, National was no longer a product of the Chesapeake Bay, brewed in the land of pleasant living. Over the past 3 decades, many changes have come to Baltimore and to the nation. In 1978, Jimmy Carter signed H.R. 1337 into law, legalizing home brewing once again. This encouraged many to begin brewing a variety of beers. By the 1980s, demand for high-quality, flavorful beers had returned to Baltimore. Baltimore was ready to embrace her brewing heritage once again, and in 1988, Hugh Sisson and Senator George Della worked to change the laws in Maryland. They wanted to legalize brew pubs for the first time since Prohibition.